Tell me if this sounds familiar. You've decided to go back to business school. Congratulations, by the way. But you've just discovered that as part of the application process, you have to take this thing called the executive assessment. And now you're thinking to yourselves, like, oh my gosh, it has been a really long time since I have taken any sort of standardized test, first of all. And second of all, it's been a really long time since I've seen the type of stuff tested on the executive assessment. Or maybe you're here because you don't even know what this whole executive assessment thing is all about. Well, that's what I'm here for. I'm Brett Ethridge, founder of Dominate Test Prep and lead EA instructor at Dominate Test Prep. And that's what I want to do for you in this video, is just to demystify the executive assessment for you, right? Sometimes when we at least know what we're in store for, the clouds sort of break and you at least know what you need to do to prepare for it, what content is tested on the executive assessment, what the question types are like, and that's exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to go through all of the different sections, the question types. I'm going to give you some examples. So real quick about that, just sort of some logistics. In the context of explaining everything to you here, I am going to show you a bunch of examples of all of the different question types, but I'm not going to actually answer them in this video. That would make for a really long video, and that's not the purpose of this video. But I have taken the liberty of giving detailed solutions to all of the practice questions you're going to see here and made them available for free over on my website. So you can head over to dominatetestprep.com. I'll post a link below as well to the page where you can just opt in to get the video solutions to all of those questions and some really cool tips and tricks and strategies for different types of questions so that you can get them right on test day. So that said, when you see the questions pop up on your computer screen here, feel free to press pause if you want, try them on your own, and if you want, you can even post your answers in the discussion area below and see how you do. But here, what I want to do, as we get back to the topic at hand, is I just want to introduce you to the executive assessment. Let's go through exactly what is on it and what you are in store for. All right, so I hope you're ready. I am. I'm excited to take a closer look. Now, you see on the screen, there are three major sections of the executive assessment: integrated reasoning, verbal reasoning, and quantitative reasoning. Those are literally what they call the sections of the exam. And I want to point out a very important aspect of that, right? Something we need to talk about right at the outset. What do you notice? What do you recognize as sort of a common thread among the three different sections of the executive assessment? That word reasoning, right? Integrated reasoning, verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning, right? At the end of the day, the test makers view the executive assessment as a reasoning test. And as such, I want you to adopt that mindset as well. So many people come to the executive assessment and they're saying, oh my gosh, I haven't done math in forever. I need to become an algebra expert. Like, teach me all the algebra I need to know. There's definitely some algebra tested on the executive assessment for sure, but sometimes you can get right answers without having to do the algebra. For example, if you just learn to reason your way to right answers. So it's not strictly a math test or a math section. Some people call it the math section. It's the quantitative reasoning section. I can't just give you a whole bunch of formulas and have you do really, really well on the executive assessment. It may help you with certain question types, but other question types require a little bit more reasoning. Same thing with the verbal reasoning side. When I show you some of the content and the question types, you'll better understand that, right? It's not just an English grammar test, for example. It's not the English section. It's the reading section. It's a verbal reasoning section, and likewise with integrated reasoning. So I feel like it's important to just say that at the outset. Can you learn reasoning? Can you study reasoning? Yes and no. There's absolutely things that I teach in my course, for example, to help you come at questions from non-traditional ways and reason your way to right answers, even if you don't always know how to just do the math. So for sure, some of it can be taught, but I think just realizing that that's sort of the framework that you want to attack this exam with will help you. It'll help you as you're preparing. It'll help you as you're looking at question types as they pop up on your computer screen. All right, so with that, now let's dive into the different sections, starting with No, not the integrated reasoning section. And I'll tell you why in a moment, right? That is the first section you're going to tackle on test day, but I'm going to skip it for now and we're going to come back to it. And I want to start by discussing the verbal reasoning section. The verbal reasoning section tests your ability to evaluate arguments and to read, understand, and edit written material using standard English. So there's quite a few clues in that description as to what you need to be learning and thinking about, and what kind of content is on the verbal reasoning section: arguments in written English and reading. And yes, there's all of that tested in 3 ways. So there are 3 major question types on the verbal reasoning section, starting with a question type called sentence correction. Sentence correction looks a little something like this. So here you see your first sample question on the executive assessment, very much like what you will see on test day. How do you know you're dealing with sentence correction? Because you see a sentence. That's it, one sentence, part of which is underlined. So again, if you want to press pause, you can. You see this sentence at the top, the government's projections on business growth and unemployment, blah, blah, blah. And then notice toward the end, part of that sentence is underlined, and your job is simply to decide, is it correct in its current state? Is the sentence written the best way possible grammatically and in terms of getting meaning across? Or does something need to be changed? If you think it's exactly perfect as it is, go with answer choice A. If you think a modification needs to be made to make the sentence better, then choose answer choice B, C, D, or E accordingly. Standard multiple choice, choose one answer. This is what sentence correction looks like. So there you go, pretty straightforward. Your first look, sentence correction, and that's actually the question type that students are usually able to make the biggest gains on. So there is a lot of English grammar that you're going to have to learn. And I'm going to summarize all of the content that you need to know for the verbal reasoning section here in a moment. But sentence correction is very English grammar heavy, but it's more than that. There is a reasoning component, big picture understanding, to know whether or not a sentence is the most effective way of expressing what they're trying to express. And even if you're a non-native English speaker, these question types are going to become your friend once you learn the best way of attacking them. So that's the first question type on the verbal reasoning section. The second question type is called critical reasoning. Here's that word reasoning again. And this is very much logical reasoning. Remember, the description of verbal reasoning included words about arguments and analyzing arguments. That's what we're doing on critical reasoning. Let's take a look at a sample question. So here's sample question 2. It is a critical reasoning question. It is a short paragraph, so more than one sentence, and nothing's underlined, so you know it's not sentence correction. And I usually start by advising students to actually start by reading the question itself. And so you notice after the introductory paragraph, you have your question. Which of the following, if true, is the best basis for a counter argument against the conclusion drawn above? Oh man, so now we have to read the argument, we have to figure out the conclusion, we have to come up with a counter argument to that conclusion, and then one of those answer choices is going to be correct. This is a sample critical reasoning question, and it's a big part of doing well on verbal reasoning. And some of you maybe have never even really been taught the parts of a logical argument and how to strengthen and weaken arguments and identify conclusions, and it's all stuff that you're going to have to get up to speed on. Certainly if you want to do well on verbal reasoning, it's not rocket science, but there are some things you have to learn for that second crucial question type. Which brings us to the third and final question type on the verbal reasoning section, which is reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is probably the first thing you've seen so far that's like what you've probably already done at some point in your previous academic history. Take a look at this sample question. So this probably looks somewhat familiar. You're going to get a passage, in this case a longer passage. So how do you know it's reading comprehension? Well, first of all, you'll be prompted that there will be more than one question about the given passage. So here, over on the right, you only see one question, but on the real executive assessment, you will have multiple questions about the one passage that you see on the left, and you will read that passage. Multiple paragraphs, lots of words, but you're going to read it, and you're going to answer questions about it. Some of the questions are big picture types of questions like you see on your screen. The primary purpose of the passage is to, and hopefully you understand what the whole point of the passage is after you read that passage. But some of the questions might be specific detail questions where you have to go back into the text and pull out specific details or draw inferences. So there's lots of different question types you may get in the context of reading comprehension, but here you are, reading comprehension. So there you go. 3 major question types: reading comp, sentence correction, critical reasoning. And you've seen examples of the 3 major verbal question types, but let me just summarize for you the content, the concepts, the topics that you're thinking about studying then for the verbal reasoning section. Here's really sort of where to focus. Obviously, English grammar, that appears a lot on the sentence correction questions. And I said in parentheses, especially the big 6 categories. You don't have to become like an English editor. You just need to know a handful of repeatable patterns of grammar rules that appear over and over and over again. And so you definitely want to focus on that. It tests effective English expression. So this isn't just grammar. This is making sure that the sentence is expressed the best way possible. Then parts and patterns of logical arguments, which we talked about in the context of critical reasoning. A lot of critical reasoning questions ask you to strengthen or weaken an argument. So the example we looked at was asking you for a counter argument, which is effectively weakening the argument, right? If you're going to counter their conclusion, well, you're weakening their conclusion. You're attacking their conclusion. And that's a lot of what you're doing on critical reasoning. And then the best thing you can do between now and test day is read, and read some more, because what's tested? Reading, your ability to comprehend what you are reading. And you see this number 14, there are going to be 14 total questions on the verbal reasoning section, 30 minutes to do the verbal reasoning section, so about 2 minutes per question. Of course, the time management doesn't quite work out exactly that way when it comes to reading comp, but that's all something you'll do in your practice. So now you know what you're in store for. Some of you might be thinking, like, oh my gosh, what have I gotten myself into? Others of you might be saying, oh, whew, it's not so bad. Like, I can do that. Wherever you fall on the spectrum, that's okay, but we're learning, we're diving in. Which brings us now to the second section, so technically the third section, but the second one we're going to talk about, verbal reasoning, and then you're going to move to the quantitative reasoning, the math section, but I've told you let's not think about it just as the math section, the quantitative reasoning section. Again, 14 questions in 30 minutes, so about 2 minutes per question. And you will be tested according to 2 major question types. We'll get to that in a second, but first, let me sort of just summarize that the quantitative reasoning section tests your ability to analyze data and draw conclusions using mathematical and reasoning skills. Notice they don't say, test your ability to solve a bunch of math problems. And when you see some of these questions, you will certainly see some questions that look like your run-of-the-mill math questions, but other questions very much are reasoning based. It's a unique way of coming at math and quantitative skills on the quantitative reasoning section. Which brings us back to our 2 major question types. The first are called problem-solving questions. And these are also going to look very familiar, right? So far, I'm thinking reading comp probably looks somewhat familiar to you. And problem solving, this is what you've done most of your academic career when it comes to math, whether on other standardized tests or even just back in high school math class. They're sort of your run-of-the-mill math problems. Take a look at this example. So you see it on the screen, and by the way, I'll point out, they're all multiple choice questions, so you will choose one of those 5 possible answer choices. The correct answer to the following question: in a certain school, 40 more than 1/3 of all the students are taking a science course, blah, 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 right? So you can press pause, you can try this question on your own if you want. You know, I haven't selected the hardest questions you might see on test day, but this isn't necessarily a super easy question either, assuming it's been a while since you've done this type of math and seen fractions and tried to do, solve for x, which, by the way, might be how you're thinking you want to solve this question and might not be the best way of solving this question. Again, can you sort of reason your way to a right answer here? I'll leave that to you to kind of deliberate on for a moment, but I just want to introduce you to a question like this, problem solving on the executive assessment. So love it or hate it, that's problem solving, and obviously there's lots of different math concepts that could appear on problem solving questions. I'll summarize those here in just a moment as well, but algebra and arithmetic and probability and statistics and lots of stuff is fair game. So yes, you might have to dust off some of those math cobwebs to make sure that you know how to answer any potential problem solving question they could throw at you. But you also have to do well on the second major quantitative reasoning question type, which is called data sufficiency. And this is where more of the reasoning comes into play, because these are math questions that are unlike any math questions you've probably ever seen before. It's a very unique way of coming at math. Instead of problem solving where they flat out ask you, they give you some information and ask you the question and you come up with the answer to that question, with data sufficiency, you're simply trying to decide whether or not you could answer the question with the information given. Remember the summary of how quantitative reasoning works? You're analyzing data and drawing conclusions. That's essentially what we're doing on data sufficiency. You're looking at the information they've given you and you're just trying to decide, do I have enough information? Can I answer this question or do I need more information? I know that's sort of esoteric. Let's make it concrete by looking at this example. So this is probably your first ever look at a data sufficiency question. Even if you've seen it before, let me try to break it down for you. You see the question stem way at the top. If x and y are integers, is x, y even? Okay, so it seems like that's the question we're trying to answer, right? Yes or no, that's a yes-no question. But I'm not actually trying to answer the question, I just need to know if I could answer the question. Can I definitively know whether or not x, y is even, based on the two statements that they give you next? So you see statement 1, x equals y plus 1. Statement 2, x over y is an even integer. And you just have to filter through that information and decide, is that enough? Is that enough to answer the question, either individually, like just with statement 1 or just with statement 2, or do I need both bits of information? Or even with both of those pieces of information, would I still need some additional information to be able to definitively answer that question, is x, y even? And those answer choices speak to different conclusions that you'll make according to what I just sort of laid out, right? A big part of doing well on data sufficiency is learning and understanding what those answer choices even mean. Again, sort of beyond the context of what we're doing here in this video, but nevertheless, a look at data sufficiency on the executive assessment. So again, now at least you know what you're in store for. Maybe you feel good about things. Maybe you're starting to sweat a little bit because you realize you are going to have to brush up on a fair bit of stuff to do well on problem solving and data sufficiency, 14 total questions. And let me go ahead and again here summarize the content and the concepts and the topics that you need to know to do well on the executive assessment quantitative section. Arithmetic, basic arithmetic, and I don't just mean 2 plus 2 equals 4, although you do have to know how to do basic arithmetic. But I'm talking about fractions and decimals and percents and averages and percent change and ratios, all of that stuff could appear on either problem solving or data sufficiency, by the way, on the quantitative section. Basic algebra, so again, we're talking about high school level math here, maybe even in some cases middle school level math, but things like simultaneous equations, quadratic equations, exponents, roots and radicals, which I don't have listed here, word problems, which you could do algebraically or you could sometimes do in non-traditional ways, which is a lot of what I teach in my courses, reasoning your way to right answers. Again, these aren't exhaustive lists of every single math topic that could appear, but these are sort of the biggies. Like if you're thinking about where to focus your time and effort, if you get up to speed on sort of these bullet points, you'll be in a good position to get enough right answers to get the EA score you need. Data analysis includes things like statistics, means, median, modes, probability, combinatorics, which are like combinations and permutations, and then number properties, factors, divisibility, prime factorization, remainders, how prime numbers work, evens and odds, right? The example we just looked at was something even or odd, and so that comes into play as well in terms of the content that you can be expected to know on the quantitative reasoning section of the executive assessment. Which brings us back to integrated reasoning, right? So verbal reasoning, quantitative reasoning. Why did I leave integrated reasoning for last when it's actually the first section? And the reason is because most of the skills that you need to do well on integrated reasoning, you will learn in the context of studying for verbal reasoning and quantitative reasoning, right? And that's a good thing. Take a look at what integrated reasoning tests. Integrated reasoning tests your ability to evaluate information presented in multiple formats from multiple sources. Implicit in the word integrated, how different bits of information relate and integrate, and you're answering questions by pulling information from multiple sources and formats. But once you do that, a lot of the actual stuff you need to do to get right answers are math skills and verbal skills. You just have to do it with unique question formats. And specifically, you need to be able to read and interpret charts and graphs, and then answer questions. By the way, using some of the skills maybe you learned in quantitative reasoning, for example. So I need to learn how to pull information from a chart and a graph, but then maybe once I have the numbers, all I need to do is figure out a percent change, for example. Well, that's stuff you have to be able to do on problem solving. See what I mean by that? So graphs and charts, and there's literally a question called graphics interpretations. You're going to need to know how to read tables and sort information on tables. This section is very interactive. Like literally you can click, the column header on a table and the information will sort, right? And so you'll get familiar with it as you practice, but can you pull information from tables? And again, answer some questions using a lot of the skills, again, that you're already going to have learned in the quantitative reasoning section. So table analysis questions, text and data, that's not the name of the question type, it's called multi-source reasoning, but this is where you have multiple tabs of data and I need to pull some information from here, some information from here, answer some questions. Might be math heavy. A lot of times multi-source reasoning questions are verbal heavy. Reading comprehension. Can you read for big picture? Can you see how this information relates to this information? Yes, there could be some numbers in there. Some of the multi-source reasoning questions are just a lot of text. You're answering questions very much in a verbal way, including some critical reasoning concepts, right? So you're already preparing for integrated reasoning as you're preparing for the rest of the exam, but there's still very specific question types you will need to practice and get up to speed on. And then finally, kind of word problems. Word problems in the context asked slightly differently than word problems on problem solving or word problems on data sufficiency. Sometimes they're word problems, two-part analysis questions they're called, where you're literally just word problems and you're answering a couple questions about the information that they've given you. Sometimes it's sort of word problems in the context of text and data. And so I know there's a lot going on here. You'll get familiar with it as you practice. But what I do want to do is I want to show you an example and so sort of summarize what you need to be preparing for. Go ahead and take a look at this question. So this is a sample graphics interpretation question, one of the four major question types. It's obviously a chart. So here it's a pie chart, and you see the data, you see a title over on the left, right? We're going to read for big picture. Integrated reasoning is it's math with a lot of words, or it's a lot of words with a little bit of math. So it's verbal and quant mixed together. But you have the information over on the right, a recent census revealed the age distribution, blah, 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 right? It's just sort of explaining what the pie chart is about. The title tells you a little bit about what the pie chart is about. You need to be able to read the data inside the pie chart to understand how it all works. And then you're going to be given a couple of questions about that information. Here you see question 6B. So this would be the second part question, right? There presumably had been a 6A. Another question about that information, but here's another question that you have to answer. And it is a drop-down menu type of a question, right? So I need to pull information from there, answer the question. If at the time of the census there were 540 more people aged 0 to 39 than people aged 40 or greater, blah, 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 blah. And then you have this drop-down menu. So it is multiple choice, but from a drop-down menu, you'll notice if you click that little down arrow, boom, up comes your possible answer choices, and you would select one of those four possible answer choices, one of which is correct. And obviously it would have to be correct to get this question right. So your first look at graphics interpretation, perhaps you'll need to get familiar with some of the other integrated reasoning question types as well. Again, feel free to press pause and try this one on your own, but there's a look at graphics interpretation for you. And to summarize what we just talked about, the content and topics tested on integrated reasoning, it's really everything from the quantitative section is fair game. But I would say it's a lot more percents and fractions and decimals, especially percent change. There's almost always some sort of percent change question. But you could see, especially on table analysis, but you could see probability. I mean, anything's fair game. And likewise, really everything you're learning for critical reasoning, that's what CR means, and RC, reading comprehension, from the verbal section will help you do well on integrated reasoning as well. Reading for big pictures, seeing how different things relate to one another. Reading and analyzing tables, charts, and graphs, synthesizing data from multiple sources. And I say correlation, sometimes you get scatter plots or something and you need to see how data is related positively or negatively. Are they correlated positively or negatively? So there you go. Hopefully you feel better about things, right? Hopefully you're not freaked out. It's a lot. It's 40 total questions, right? I forgot to mention there are 12 integrated reasoning questions. Each section is 30 minutes. So when we think about the total time, it's only a 90-minute exam, right? I would say you can do anything for 90 minutes. It'll be done before you know it, and you're looking at about 40 total questions, and then it'll spit out a score between 100 and 200. And a score right in the middle, 150, is really the expected score at a lot of school these days. So, don't quote me on that exactly. Make sure you understand the admissions requirements of the schools that you are applying to. Some of the higher level business schools are expecting higher scores, maybe in the 155 range, maybe 160. You can figure that out, but take some practice tests, buckle down. You now know what you're in store for. You probably have a pretty good sense right now what you need to get up to speed on, and wherever you fall on that spectrum, I can assure you that you can do it, and it doesn't have to take too much time to prepare. Take a look at what one of my former students, James Wright, had to say. He emailed me this right after he got his score. He was ecstatic, and he said, look, it had been a long time since I had seen a lot of the stuff tested on the executive assessment. He said, especially on the math side. But with our course, Dominate Test Prep's course, look, he said he was able to dominate it in just 4 weeks. So he went to work, and a month later, he was really just shooting for a 155, which is a pretty good score in and of itself. He blew that out of the water after going through our course. He got a 161. He says, quote, all thanks to Brett's fantastic prep materials. Thank you, James. He said this prep was worth every penny and hour he put into it. So if, as we're sort of wrapping this up, you're looking at everything on the executive assessment, you're saying, okay, thank you, I now know what's on store for it, but how do I get up to speed on all this? How do I learn all these question types? How do I learn to reason and get up to speed on all the math and brush up all those math cobwebs? We've got you covered. Head over to dominatetestprep.com/executive-assessment and go ahead and just register for our comprehensive course. We'll take all the guesswork out of preparing for it for you. But even if not, go grab kind of the free resource we've put together, our video solutions to every single one of the questions that we put up on the screen in front of you today. If any of those you didn't quite know how to do, you'll know how to after watching my solution videos. So lots of resources for you. I am here to help empower you to dominate the executive assessment. And with that, I'll go ahead and sign off. I hope you have found it helpful. Leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Either your answers to some of the questions we've gone through, maybe any concerns you have about the executive assessment, or let us know, why are you even taking the executive assessment, right? What types of programs are you applying to? So I'll look forward to interacting with you in the discussion area below. And for now, we'll sign off and see you next time as we continue to empower you to dominate the executive assessment. Take care, everyone.